right, let's also tell you how the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has blasted Europe over the ongoing crisis in West Asia as tensions remain high in the region. Hegseth has argued that the U.S. should not shoulder the burden of protecting the Strait of Hormuz alone, adding that Europe and Asia should take a larger role. As EU leaders discuss the war in Iran in the Cypriot capital, the U.S. Secretary of War, during a Pentagon briefing, made sharp remarks targeting Europe, saying it should do less talking and having less fancy conferences.
We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do, and might want to start doing less talking and having less fancy conferences in Europe and get in a boat.
Hegseth also lashed out at Europe for not committing naval forces to forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz after Iran effectively shut the key waterway down in retaliation for the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against the country. As American commitment to NATO is under scrutiny under President Trump, European leaders are meeting in Cyprus to discuss strengthening mutual defense capabilities at the EU-level leaders, including the French President Emmanuel Macron, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. They're all in Nicosia for the summit. In fact, Giorgia Meloni insists that NATO would remain central to European defense, but that European countries needed to play a bigger role in their own security. Following a meeting with the EU leaders, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that it is too early to talk about relieving any kind of sanctions on Iran.
Sanctions relief should be conditional on verification of de-escalation, particularly on progress on the international effort to contain its nuclear threat and on a change to the repression of its own people. You described elements of that. And that was the reason why we adopted the sanctions regime in the first place. The behavior of the regime, we should not forget 17,000 young people have been killed in the first month of this year. So the reason for that has to be ended before we can speak about lifting sanctions.
The disruption in Hormuz has sent energy prices soaring across Europe, prompting severe energy crisis. Apart from the discussions on the Iran war, leaders have been meeting in Cyprus to discuss the EU Article 42.7 that provides mutual assistance in case of an armed attack. European countries insist that they do not see Article 42.7 as a substitute for NATO's Article 5 because it is not backed by detailed operational plans or military structures. EU members such as Cyprus, which are not part of NATO, want clarifications about it and its assurances from the bloc regarding their security. Cyprus, remember, is particularly keen to firm up Article 42.7 after a drone struck a British airbase on the island last month during the Iran war. The country that currently holds the rotating EU Council presidency is not a member of NATO.
There are a number of questions that we need to have an answer. Let's say France triggers Article 42.7. Which countries are going to be the first to respond to the request of the French government? What are the needs of the government or the country that triggers Article 42.7? All those, they are going to be put in a blueprint in order to know when and if a member state triggers Article 42.7 to have an operational plan to put in action.
The meeting, however, has one conspicuous absence, that is of Hungary's outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban, who will leave office sometime next month, has decided to skip what would have been his last summit. His office says this is due to the handover of power that is currently underway. Most EU leaders are looking forward to turning the page on Orban's era, which has been characterized by near constant disruption and opposition, especially regarding Ukraine.